All right, let's jump right into it today. I want to talk about costs. More specifically, I want to talk about direct costs. Um, just to clarify, not to assume that everybody knows, when I talk about direct costs, I'm talking about the costs that it takes a home builder to build the home from the foundation all the way through the roof and everything in between, the electrical, the appliances, and whatnot. So, not the land, not the land development, the direct costs. Depending upon the market that you're in, typically speaking, your direct cost should be in the neighborhood of 45% of the sell price of the home in most of the markets. You get into the coastal markets, California, Oregon, Washington, the Northeast, some of the higher land price areas, that tends to move a little bit down, and then it's more in the neighborhood of about 30%, give or take a couple of percents, depending upon when you're at. But what I want to talk specifically in this episode about costs is what I am consistently hearing right now in the marketplace about costs. The market is getting very competitive, and I talk to a lot of trade partners, and it seems right now that home builders are fishing for lower costs, and a lot of trades are taking the bait. And so I hear a lot of discussion about prices are down, the market's very competitive, margins that I were able to get, a year ago, 2 years ago, I can't get. Margins that would have almost always got me the job as competitive a year ago are not getting me jobs right now. And so I want to take a little bit of time and talk about some of the dynamics that I think are going on that are leading into this, some of the things that can have impacts on it and what's going on. And I want to start with, I talked recently about when interest rates hit 7% in October of 2022, a lot of builders took their foot off the gas of land deals. A lot of them stopped pushing on land deals. They let some land deals go back to the land sellers. In some instances, home builder sentiment got so rough that they even walked away from deposits that they had on land because, sales really took a hit when interest rates went to that place. And builders hadn't yet figured out how to work around that and to adjust that for the monthly payment for home buyers. But now they have, and so that's kind of beyond us. But there was a 6-month window, the fourth quarter of 2022 and the first quarter of 2023, where not a lot of land deals were getting done. And so that 6 months, fast forward 18 to 24 months beyond that, we're in that window of time now where those deals that were not purchased are not getting bid out. So from a trades perspective, a lot of trades, I think, are looking at things and going, oh, there's not as many new bids coming out. So what do I do? They start looking at their backlog. How much work do they already have contracted? How many people do they have on staff that they need to keep employed? And there's fewer bids coming out. And there's a lot of bids that I'm hearing have not been let yet that are still out there waiting to be awarded. And there's some push and fishing going on for better costs and better pricing. And so you combine those two things. So there's a little squeeze going on the jobs that are out that have not been awarded. There's fewer jobs going out to bid, and a lot of trade partners look at the backlog. And when I say some are taking the bait, what I mean is that some are making their moves and getting competitive to get the jobs. Well, one domino falls, so does the next one and the next one. And so what I'm seeing is that this is kind of pushing its way through the industry a little bit. And a lot of different trade categories that I'm talking to, I'm hearing multiple companies talking about margins are really getting squeezed for trade partners because they're having to get really competitive to win these jobs. Now, supply and demand, I get it. These fewer projects, there's less to go around. But what is it that really is like the sort of the root cause of sort of how these prices move up and down? How do we get ourselves into these positions? And it goes back to the land purchasing cycle goes back a long ways. We talked about it. It's after a piece of land is purchased, depending upon where it's at in the entitlement and the finish stage, it could be two years is a short cycle, and arguably if it's not entitled for homes, then it could take 3 or 4 years. And so builders are buying that land based on the market of that day. I talked earlier about the direct costs and how the direct costs have a correlation to the sell price of a home. Home building is unique from the standpoint of houses are worth what people are willing and able to pay for them. And most builders, most home sellers, even you're reselling a home, there's a market value for a home today. The market value for a new home is a market value for a used home. And that value is what it is. And it often goes back to square footage, and we can go down a rabbit hole about what that means. If I have a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,300 square foot house, and then down the road in the same zip code is a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house that's 2,700 square feet, it's going to cost more in most instances. In my opinion, this is a struggle in home building. Is like it all comes back to bedroom bathroom count, and the big one is the cost per square foot. Home buyers, realtors still do that. It's ingrained in the situation. So when home builders are looking to purchase a piece of land, they're analyzing how many lots can they get on it, what size lots can they get, what size homes can they put, what do they need to put there. But the value of that land is based on that point in time. If the cost of homes, market-wise, go down 2 years from now, the land that builders are buying today is going to cost more relative to the sell price because of the market dynamic shifts. What impacts the sell price of a home? Like what the market value is? Interest rates for one, right? And so even though builders are buying down rates, trying to get them back down into, let's call it the 5% range from, the upper sixes where they're at now, that comes at a cost too. And so there's all these dynamics that move around, but I want to start really with they buy the land relative to the market that they buy it in, and then they go 2 to 3 years out before they actually start selling that land. I air quoted that for those of you just listening. Selling that land as a finished product with a home on it. And so sometimes that can be in the builder's favor, and sometimes it can be not in the builder's favor. And as we talked about on my earnings report summary that I shared, a lot of the builders were talking about their land cost and their development costs are up, right? So land costs and development costs are up from what they were, like today. So that land that they bought 2 years ago, it coming to finished product today that they can build houses on, those costs are going up month over month, year over year. And why is that? Well, if you're a land seller, you want to get top dollar for your land, right? And so if you're going to go sell land today and home prices are high, you also understand that your land is a part of that cost of that home that's going to sell for 10 or 15 or 20% more today than it was, in the past. So land sellers are asking strong pricing today. And in talking to some builders, I would say, there's some land sellers that they want very, very top dollar. And the thing about that is typically land sellers are patient. And if they aren't going to get the number that they want for their land, they can usually wait. Builders typically can't wait. Why? Builders have to build homes. And to build homes, they need land. If they don't build homes, they're not buying the land. So, land sellers can be more patient than builders. Then let's take that down. So now if I'm a builder and my land costs are up and my land development costs are up, now 2 years, 3 years down the road, I'm about to start putting a product on that land. I start looking at the cost to build those homes to put together the whole total cost of the finished goods relative to what I can sell it for today. And we talk about interest rates are rising. Interest rates come up. That pushes home pricing that we can sell to the buyers down. And we're getting to this place where margins for builders are getting eroded. And if you see that happening to you as a builder, when you're at that stage, when you're about ready to build, all you have left from a cost perspective is the cost of the home. Now, there are several ways that you can control and manage those costs or reduce those costs. One of those is you can be very efficient with your overall process and your overhead. Builders are getting pressure on that because they're still putting out a lot of money per home to buy down those high 6 rates down into the low 5s or even 4.99. But there are things they can do. They can build homes faster. Some builders are really good. If you can build a home in 4 months instead of 5 months, you'll save on your interest carry. So operationally, overhead-wise, there are things builders can do. The other thing that builders can do to reduce their cost is they can be very thoughtful in their design. From the ground up, they can look at everything they put into a home and ask 2 questions. Actually, I ask a lot of questions, but 2 main questions that I like to ask is, number one, from a buyer's perspective, is that item a need or a want? If it's a need, it's got to stay in the home. I can, though, look at that and say, is there a way to meet that need in a different way for a lower cost, more efficiently? Is it a want? Now this is where it gets tricky, and I find that a lot of builders put too many wants in their homes. So we call it, some of it's called spec creep. What they put into homes so they can keep up with the Joneses, their competitors, their competition. If you look around at any of the major metropolitan markets and you see where there's lots of builders building, let's say in a given, area market like the Inland Empire of California or Dallas, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, some builders have a tendency to see what their competitors are doing and go, oh, we need to do that. The problem with that is it's typically a want. And 6 months ago, they looked at another builder and saw something they did and they said, oh, we need to do that. And they didn't do a cross analysis to realize or see that over time, and this is particularly for some of the smaller builders out there, or sort of more the regional ones, the regional production builders, the 200-300 home a year builders, and they're struggling to compete with the bigger nationals. They turn around and all of a sudden after a couple of years, they have all of these extra features that no other builder has, none of the big ones. And now they find themselves at a disadvantage because they've driven their cost up. So the second thing, like I said, they can do is be very thoughtful about their design, including architecture, including their structural design, their mechanical design, their electrical design, their plumbing design, and partner with their trades and their professional services, the architects, the structural engineers, and the mechanical engineers, to be very thoughtful. Put together a home that goes together faster, because then you'll also improve your cycle time. So you can be very thoughtful about your design and what you put into a home, both from the structure and from what we call the bells and whistles. So you can also, though, another way that builders can get their costs down, so we talked about they can operationally be more efficient, number one, build homes faster. Number two, they can do a very, very thoughtful analysis of the design of their homes, both the bells and whistles and the structure. And the third thing they can do is they can, I'll say, negotiate, squeeze, push, leverage. They can really get very competitive in their bidding practices. Maybe that's new bidders that they haven't worked with in a little while. Maybe that's just a little bit longer of a negotiation, holding things out a little bit longer. Work the market to their advantage to try to squeeze their costs down. And there are mixed feelings about that approach to things. It has its place. We need to pay the right market rate for as much of the products and services that we buy as possible. You're not going to pay the same price for an organic banana at Trader Joe's as you are for an inorganic banana at Trader Joe's. Once again, want or need. Do you need an organic banana or do you want an organic banana? People make these trade-offs all the time. And so these types of negotiations, they happen. So what's happened, though, in my opinion, is land sellers want top dollar for their land. The developers, like the land developers, the big pipeline companies, the grading companies, these are very capital intensive equipment companies. They have lots of expensive equipment, lots of fuel, very skilled workers, aging workforce. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. And builders find themselves with these homes and lots, and their margins are getting eroded. And I know some people are going to say, well, builder margins are good. Mike, I read your report. I listened to the earnings calls, and I would, yes, they are. And in some instances, from what I see, builder margins generally tend to be pretty solid compared to some of the trade partner margins today. The issue we have, though, is there's a dynamic that goes on in the large public builder world where they have forecasts that they need to meet and numbers that they need to meet. And they tend to drive the economy. It can be difficult for a builder who's doing 200 or 300 homes in the Denver metro area, let's say, to compete with a large public who's doing 1,500 to 2,000. In some markets, Arizona, you could have home builders building 100 homes a year competing with someone doing 3. And those large builders, they have forecasts and numbers that they have to work towards. So I talked about this. I'm the big advocate of item number 1 and 2. Let's be operationally more efficient so we can build homes quicker and faster with the same level of quality and the same fit and finish. But then let's also be really thoughtful about our design. You can't have everything. You can't have the most beautiful home with the most features and expect to sell that home for a price that is equivalent to one of the large builders who's focusing on value-oriented, entry-level product and still make a profit. So developers, builders, everybody's feeling a bit of pinch in the margin. But right now what we are seeing is it's come down to what's left, and that's the direct costs when we started this off. So the trade partners who build the houses are feeling this pinch right now, and they're having to make some tough decisions. They're having to decide, do they wait? Do they wait for the market to come back, which I believe it will? There's a lot of land projects that are coming out to bid. I'm going to call it like maybe December, but it's probably really going to end up being more like in January. And it's going to open up a little bit more then. But they're having to decide, how is their backlog? Do they really need to take that 3 or 4 or 5% reduction to get that job? Or do they let it go? And so these are the dynamics that are happening in the industry right now. I believe they're temporary. I believe the fundamentals of the market are strong. As we talked about, July sales for new homes were really, really good, really strong. I'm waiting to see the August numbers to see if that continues. I do expect August to finally taper off. We're in that part of the season where it should definitely taper off. And I do expect interest rates to come down. So I think that's going to help some things a little bit. It depends. Interest rates coming down can create other problems. They can drive prices up because now people have a little bit more they can spend on. But tough decision to make. They said home builders are out fishing for lower prices, lower costs, and I'm already hearing it. Some trades are taking the bait, and the workload's going to be coming back, and then we're going to have a whole different series of issues because, and we'll get into this in one of the next episodes, The trade force that we have is diminishing. It's getting older. It's getting smaller. The average age is 42, only 1 year older than the overall age force in the United States. Doesn't sound like much, does it? But think about this before we delve deeper into that. 42 years old, but only 1 year older than the rest of the workforce. Well, what trades do is very hard work, very commendable, very respectable, but very hard work. It's out in the elements. It can be hot, it can be cold, heavy lifting, up and down off of your knees. It's difficult work on your back, your knees, your body. So when we compare that age of 42 to 41 of the rest of the overall workforce population, we forget to say that it's a very demanding physical job. So who do you think can be more productive? The 42-year-old who's out in 100-degree heat in Riverside, California, putting concrete roof tile on a new home? Or the 41-year-old in Riverside, working in an office, programming for some AI software? Or the 41-year-old that's working in a warehouse, driving a forklift, not in the sun, maybe in some level of condition, but sitting. This is what I think is missed when we look at these numbers of the age of the workforce. And I want to challenge the whole industry to think about this. That problem is not getting better. And so when we drive our cost down by number 3, by just the brute force negotiation, 3 bids and a prayer, as some folks like to call it, or 4 bids and 5 bids and a prayer, we achieve the objective of lowering our costs, but at what expense? In the long run, what will happen? Because now all those trade partners are going to have less money, so they're going to squeeze. Who do you think they squeeze? They try to squeeze their suppliers, but I'm talking to them too, and let me tell you what, there ain't much relief there. So they squeeze their workers. And that 42-year-old that's on that roof at 100 plus degrees in August in Riverside or Austin or even Denver or Phoenix is going to get asked to do that job for a little less money next year in the summer of 25 than in the summer of 24. And he might just think about, or she might just think about, retiring a little early, going into a different line of work. So think about that, because I have said many times, and I wrote an article and I should put a link to it in the show notes. The aging workforce in the trade industry is going to pose a much bigger problem for us, and every year it gets more and more difficult. And situations like the one we're in now as it relates to direct costs, in my opinion, will only exacerbate it. So we need to think about it, because what's going to happen? And in the short run, I'll say this to the builders. If that's how the costs have been achieved, the reductions that you've been after, what do you think that does to the quality of the trades in the market? I know all us builders like to think, well, I'll demand the best foreman and the best crews. Well, you know what? Somebody is going to end up with the worst crew. It's like my brother used to say. Do you know what they call the person who graduated last in their class in medical school? Doctor. So when those trades start to leave, and there's less good ones, and when we start to squeeze down the cost that we pay the trades, we start to lower the quality, and they end up somewhere. And we can try to convince ourselves that they won't end up on our jobs, but they will. And so my case that I'm trying to make is, let's be more thoughtful and more holistic about how we truly design our homes, partner with our trade partners, partner with our architects, partner with our structural engineers to thoughtfully get the cost out of the home without removing the value. Make easier homes to build so that trades can actually make more money at the same rate. Make homes that are still a value for homeowners with rising interest rates or high interest rates. And get the things and the waste out of the house that's really adding no value to the end user. There's a lot of it there. So that's it. That's today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts, ideas, or comments or want to add to it, please put them in there below. And thank you again for tuning in. And we'll look forward to continuing these discussions on the Builder's Mindset.